again, and welcome to ManchTalk. I'm Tammy Simmons. I'm your host, and I'm glad you're tuning in. Well, I guess we can say welcome to spring because it's gorgeous out there today. I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but considering the freezing, frigid temperatures we had in the past week, today's temps, which I tape on Tuesdays, today's Tuesday the 9th, and it's like 40 degrees out there. It's crazy because within the past week, we've probably gone up 60 degrees in temperature. It was well below zero a week ago. The weekend was really, really unbearably cold. Well below zero every day, which was bizarre. It wasn't just New Hampshire, the whole eastern coast, and a good portion of the United States was going through a cold spell, and we're just going to be colder than normal because we're way up here in the corner of the country. But I hope you all survived the cold. I hope you didn't have any burst pipes or leaking pipes, or I hope your car started and that you suffered through, and hopefully the temperatures will stay a little bit better than that for the rest of January and then through the treacherous month of February, which always seems to be where we lose our patience for winter and just want to get on with spring. So we're still only, 9 days into January, so we got a good hunk of January ahead of us before we can tackle February and move on to the spring. I guess this Friday, the Saturday, it could be like in the low 50s. I mean, that's just crazy. Anyways, while the temperatures are really cold and we had the snow last week, that that was a pretty hefty snowstorm. The kids got extra time off from school, they had the Christmas week and then the New Year's week and then now last week. Talk about having a lot of time off in the middle of the winter. But it did make me kind of stop and wonder. I don't know about you, but I've signed up to get, I get email alerts from the city of Manchester about different things. You can get alerts about trash pickup delays, about emergency snow parking. There's all sorts of things you can sign up for. What I do wonder is if there isn't a way, or if there shouldn't be a way that they could more streamline the messages. Because, for instance, my trash gets picked up normally on Fridays. Now, when there's a holiday, I never really know if my trash is going to get picked up on Friday or on Saturday. Generally, my recycling is always bumped by a day. So usually the recycling gets picked up Saturday. Sometimes the trash still gets picked up on Friday, even if there was a holiday earlier in that week. Now, the messaging that came out from the city said that they were pulling back the trash deliveries that must have been on Thursday. At 3 o'clock, they were pulling the trash trucks back, so to expect a delay of a day or more for your trash pickup, which is fine. I was completely understandable. It's more important that they get the streets plowed than they pick up the trash on, the exact day that they normally do. But then I got a conflicting message that, no, you should put your trash out. We're trying to get to it. And the problem is that if you live in this, you do live in the city if you live in Manchester, but depending on which part of the city you live in, putting your trash out means blocking your driveway or blocking the sidewalk, which you really don't want to have to do. But when there's snowbanks that are created by the city plows, there's nowhere for some people to put their snow from their driveway. They can't clear a spot on the street, and then you're either leaving the trash cans in the street, which is causing a problem for traffic, or you're leaving them in their driveway, and I don't know how you're supposed to get in and out of your driveway and put a trash bin out there. But it would be nice if they could find a way to segment the city smaller, so that if there is going to be a delay with trash pickup for whatever reason, I can imagine there's other scenarios beyond just snowfall that could delay your trash pickup. It would be nice if I could just get a message that set to my little chunk of the city that says your trash is being delayed and will be picked up on Saturday, or your trash isn't going to be delayed. Please continue to put it out on Friday. I'm thinking there's probably a lot of things, including accidents or road closures, that could be sent to a more specific segment of the city, and it would improve communication between the government and our residents. So it's just something to think about. I might have to do a little investigating and find out more about the Nixle system that the messaging comes out from, and see if there is any kind of, if it's possible, and we just haven't taken advantage of it, or if it's not possible. I'm thinking there's all sorts of things that we could be signing up for alerts for, because if we have a system, let's use it to its maximum capabilities. Wanted to mention some things that are coming up in the next few weeks because it still is winter and it still is going to be cold and you're going to be looking for things to do. This coming Saturday, the 13th, is New Hampshire second Saturday free at the New Hampshire at the Courier Art Gallery. Every second Saturday of the month, all New Hampshire residents that arrive before noontime get free admission to the museum, and this is brought to us courtesy of the Botnick Family Foundation and E&R Laundry and Dry Cleaners. And you still pay if there's special exhibits, but the general gallery is open for free. New Hampshire residents, if you arrive before noon on Saturday, January 13th. They also have a great little cafe in the Courier. Dan and I have gone there on a couple occasions and had really, really good lunches. So if you need to spend Saturday indoors for some reason, even though it's probably going to be in the low 50s, but whatever, it's a great way to get to see some artwork, see the Courier, and not have to spend any money. They're located at 150 Ash Street, obviously, and you can get more information at that at courier.org. Also coming up in a couple weeks, the Manchester City Library has their $10 bag book sale. What this means is you bring an average size grocery bag, whether that's a paper bag or one of those handled shopping bags, whichever you use, something reasonably sized. You can't bring a big bag like this. And you fill them up with as many things as you want. They have over 10,000 items available, and this includes fiction and nonfiction book, audio CD, audiobooks, DVDs, CDs, all sorts of stuff from all different ranges. There's history and biography and science fiction and all sorts of stuff. It's a great way, especially if you have kids and you want to increase your own personal library at home. It's a great way to get a lot of books for not a lot of money. It's $10. That is on Saturday, January 27th at 10 a.m. at the Manchester City Library. They are located at 405 Pine Street, and you can contact Eileen Reddy over there at the library. Her email is ereddy@manchesternh.gov or by phone at 624-6550. Lastly, I think this is lastly, actually, not lastly, last subject matter. I always get postcards from Amoskeag Fishways, and I always want to go down there and take advantage of some of their special events that they have. And I missed, they had an open house on December 28th, and I missed that, which I could kick myself for. But I wanted to give people a heads up about something coming up at the end of this month that also sounds kind of exciting to me. This is also on January 27th, which is a Saturday. It's from 10 to 12 in the morning. And it is Eagles Along the Merrimack. They're going to search for bald eagles along the Merrimack. They start with an orientation over there at the Amoskeag Fishways. Then you carpool out, so you need to dress warm. And if you have binoculars, bring your binoculars. It's just $3 a person, $6 a family. You do have to pay when you register. But it sounds like a fun thing to do in the winter, and I mean, who doesn't like looking at the eagles on the Merrimack? You can get more information on that at amoskeagfishways.org. And last thing, also outdoor related, if you're like me and you like to feed the birds in your backyard and you enjoy watching the birds and the squirrels and whatnot here in the city, this is something you might want to mark your calendar for. On February 10th and 11th, there is a thing called the New Hampshire Backyard Bird Survey, and this is organized by the Audubon Society, and it's in its 30th year, and they originally started by tracking cardinals and titmice and certain birds, and they've expanded it for all birds now, and they also track squirrels. And what you do is you count how many are in your backyard so that they can see where the bird population is at and what birds are where and the squirrels and all that stuff, and they count gray squirrels and red squirrels. You can get more information on how to do this and what's involved in it by going to Bird Records. Actually, I take that back. Go to nhbirdrecords.org. I know I'm putting on my calendar, I'm going to be counting birds those days, so don't bother me. But that's all I got really for events that are coming up, things that you might want to do, even though it's probably going to return to more seasonably cold temperatures. But hopefully we'll stay in, if we can just stay in the 20s for a while, I'll be happy with that. Anyways, if you watched my show last week, you remember that I was joined by Representative Victoria Sullivan from Manchester, and we talked about Education Savings Account and SB 193, which is a piece of legislation that would allow the adequacy money from the state of New Hampshire to follow the child in certain circumstances. Kids that are already in public school, who maybe the public school isn't the right fit for them, because there are kids that just don't fit into they just don't fit into the public school that they're assigned to. This would allow the parents to get 95% of the money that the state of New Hampshire is required to pay for an adequate education of their child. They'd be able to take that money and either put their child in a private school or a Montessori school, or homeschool them and use them for certain, there's a list of expenses that they could do. Well, that last Thursday, in the middle of that cold spell, the House had session, and that bill was passed, and it's moved on to the House Finance Committee because there's finances involved. But it was really great to listen to so many people talk about, how important it is to have education opportunities for all children, and not to have anybody fall outside the cracks. Unfortunately, you see so many people who think that if you take this 3,000, I'm not even sure the number, Victoria said 3636, I thought it was 3,900. Even if it's $3,900, that's not even a third of what we spend per student on education here in New Hampshire. So even though that even if we say 3,900, even though that 3,900 might come out of the public school building, because I'd like to think that public education is about educating kids, and public schools is about the public school building and the people who work in it, and I care more about the kids than the people in the building. But taking that $3,900 out of that building that has hundreds of students in it, and would still leave probably 10 grand of my tax dollars that are collected locally here in my property taxes in that school, yet they'd have at least one less student to educate. I mean, the expectations is that maybe 1 to 3% of kids would actually take advantage of this. I look at it, and I talked to John DePietro, who ran for school board over in Ward 6, and he has had more specific numbers that I don't recall off the top of my head, but he actually did the math, and even if like 10% of the kids in Manchester, for whatever reason, opted to leave and take advantage of an ESA, we'd actually have as much, if not more money per student. We'd spend more money per student than we do now. So how is that? Why is that such a terrible thing? And why are those hell-bent on stopping school choice, insistent on trying to scare people into believing that just because you offer a child an option different than what we are traditionally used to in public education, which is a public school building with public school teachers, and you're assigned there based on what your zip code is, not by what your needs are. Changing that should only improve those public school buildings, not harm them in the long run. And I think the really good teachers can see that. I think there's very few people who can't see that actually giving those kids opportunities is what's best for New Hampshire overall. Another bill that passed that same day was SB 247, which sounded good on the surface, but in reality, from my point of view, just put mandates on parents and on physicians and on property owners. Any bill that's titled Preventing Childhood Lead Poisoning from Paint and Water sounds good on the surface. I mean, who doesn't want to prevent lead poisoning in children? Obviously, nobody wants to see any child suffer from lead poisoning. However, it's insane to put a mandate on parents that they must have their 1 and 2-year-olds tested for lead poisoning. Lead paint was banned in 1978. Those parents could have been born and raised in a house built after 1978 that didn't have any lead paint in it, let alone the 1 and 2-year-olds very much could possibly never even be in a building by the time they're 1 or 2 years old that has lead paint in it. It's just nuts. I get the concept of making lead testing more available. That's fine. I'm not a big fan of putting mandates on insurance companies, but saying that insurance companies have to cover the cost of lead testing for children, okay, maybe. Mandating that parents must have their child tested when they're 1 and 2 years old for something that those parents should know whether their children have been exposed or not. Not all kids live in apartments that have lead paint. Not all kids go to daycare. Not all kids are even remotely have the possibility of being exposed to lead paint. So forcing parents and the physicians to have to do this seems a bit crazy, in my opinion. Additionally, there's requirements for if you own a property. I mean, there's lots of people who are truly concerned about the cost of rents in Manchester and in New Hampshire in general. You know, the rental properties keep going up and up and up in price, and people say there's just not enough affordable housing and so on. The more mandates we put on landlords to remediate lead paint or the possibility of lead paint in those properties isn't going to drive down the price of rentals. It's only going to drive the cost of rents up. And the people who need the affordable housing the most are the ones that are going to pay the brunt of it, because the older apartments are the ones that all these new laws are putting the additional burdens on the landlords with. Now, personally, I think if you have a property and there is a possibility, or maybe even you own a property and there is lead paint in that building, maybe a way to help children not be exposed to that is to allow the landlord, instead of forcing him to put tens of thousands of dollars into his property that he may not be able to recoup in rents, perhaps we should allow that landlord to opt to not rent children. I know that people don't want to hear that not every landlord wants to rent to children, but if you know that your property is not conducive to a child, why should the government force you to have to rent to them if they want to live there? I think there's ways to avoid the situation without only putting the burden on one side of the equation. So SB 247, sadly, in my opinion, did pass, and unfortunately, Governor Sununu says he supports it as well, so I'm guessing that all these new government mandates will eventually go into effect, and to me, that's just unfortunate. This morning, I was listening before I came to tape here. Again, I tape on Tuesdays. The House was in session today because they need to catch up on all the bills that were retained last year in 2017. One of the bills that passed this morning, which has an interesting, game plan to it, was a bill which legalized cannabis for personal recreational use for adults over 21. It was HB 656. It had come out of the committee with an ITL recommendation, which means that the committee did not think it should pass. In order for that bill to pass, the legislators supporting it have to, one, get enough votes to say no on the ITL, and then afterwards move to ought to pass, which is OTP. So it's a multiple votes thing in order to do it. It passed, the ITL failed by, I think it was like 20 votes, so it really wasn't that close. I think it was 160 something to 180 something. So that's a pretty big span of votes. And then the ought to pass motion passed by an even broader number. I think there was like a 40 vote spread there. This bill, just in a summary, just would say that adults over 21 could possess pot or cannabis products. This is just like all legalization in most of the other bills. One interesting part about the debate was hearing Representative Keith Ammon, who's from New Boston, who's a friend of mine. He was making what's called a PI, which is a parliamentary inquiry, but really it's the summary of the bill and how you think people should vote on it. It's a mechanism that's used up in the House. And his remarks included something about, considering New Hampshire is such a state with such strong views on freedom, it would seem awful if we were an island of prohibition in a sea of legalization, because Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine, and Quebec all are in the process of legalizing recreational use as well. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. That bill goes off to Ways and Means because I know it's not a commerce bill. There's no sale of these products allowed in New Hampshire in this bill. So you can possess it. So you couldn't be arrested for possession up to a certain amount, but it still doesn't allow you to sell it. It does allow you to grow up the plant that's involved, which is kind of funny that there's regulations on a specific plant. but you can't, it wouldn't open commerce in the state of New Hampshire. So it wouldn't be like Oregon where there'd be stores set up that people could just go in and buy things. So it'll be interesting. It's gone off to Ways and Means, and it is a House bill. So after Ways and Means, if it comes out and passes after that, it will still have to go on to the Senate, and we'll see what they do to the bill. The House traditionally, in my opinion, has been much more willing to pass common sense drug legislation that removes the penalties for individuals. The Senate seems to have a little bit harder time with it, so we'll see. It'll be an interesting debate to watch. Speaking of the House and state representatives and senators and whatnot, this week Dave Booten did formally announced that he would be running for the Senate seat that he did not win last time, that he used to have before he retired. So it looks like it's going to be a Dave Booten, Kevin Kavanaugh rematch come this year. I mean, there's always a possibility that somebody else gets in the Republican primary, but still, Dave has announced that he is running, so he's starting his campaign. Additionally, Carla Gericke, who ran against Lou D'Alessandro and got 40% of the vote 2 years ago, has announced that she will again be running against Lou in District 20, which is wards 10, 11, 3, 4 in the village of Goffstown. So that'll be an interesting race as well. And if you have ever thought about running for state rep, even if you've just thought about it in passing, or you think, geez, somebody should go and do something, maybe you should seriously think about doing it this year. The filing period to register to run for office isn't until June. It's June 6th through the 15th. But now's the time when you should really start thinking about it. If you have any questions, if you're not sure how much time it would take, how much money you'd have to raise, any of those things, you can always reach out to me. If you're a registered Republican. If you're an undeclared voter, I'll also give you some feedback. If you're a registered Democrat, you're going to have to reach out to somebody in the Democrat Party. But if you're a registered Republican in Manchester and you're even remotely thinking about running for state rep, please, by all means, email me at ManchTalk@gmail.com. I'd be glad to sit down and talk with you and explain what's involved in serving and what's involved in running and what tools are available to help you get there. There's always good people that sit home and think they should do it and then they don't do it. And I really think, having served in Concord myself, it's something that you should do once in your lifetime. Lastly, our new mayor, Joyce Craig, last week, after casting the tie-breaking vote to anoint Dan O'Neill as the chair of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, went on to make her committee assignments for the upcoming term. She did not make one single Republican alderman chair of a committee. So that kind of makes you wonder what the next 2 years under Mayor Craig's going to look like. While our elections are claimed to be nonpartisan, all that really means is we don't identify on the ballot what party people belong to. And I would say making every committee chaired by a Democrat under a Democrat government is probably a clear example of what partisan politics will probably be like in the Joyce Craig administration for the next 2 years. That's all I've got for today. Make sure if you get out and enjoy the warm weather Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Fingers crossed that we don't go to those single digits or below zero anytime soon. And I will be back next week. If you have any questions, if you have any guest ideas, if you just want to send me, gee, your show stinks, gee, your show's wonderful message, that's fine. Again, it's ManchTalk@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook at ManchTalk, all one word, or on Twitter at ManchTalk. Enjoy your weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye.